We are recording. We're also unmuted, and then when Jeff gets back, we can officially start the meeting. So, just an FYI.
Yes, exactly. What I found outside.
I was just wandering.
CPS on the mic didn't work?
Yeah.
All right, we are.
Already recording, already.
All right, 1 minute passed.
Whenever you're ready.
So let's begin the March 2026 Mobility Board meeting. Quick around the room, member wise, we have Derek Mills, Dave Evans, Michael Gloden, Jeff Selzer, Matt Duff, have we heard from Kelly?
Kelly and Josh are not able to attend tonight's meeting.
Oh, okay. Are they dialing in or just not coming?
Spring break.
Spring break.
I think, we don't know.
That's the assumption. We have a nice full agenda tonight, so why don't we go get started with our public comment? I'll let you ladies fight it out as to who goes first.
Short timers to
Connie Cantrell from District 1. You mentioned last month that we've been coming 7 months. It's been well over a year.
Yeah, nice.
I've been coming and bringing fellow citizens to this board meeting for over a year. I hear each month from various members, a shuttle or circulator bus is needed. We've had a speaker tell us before COVID, a well-running circulator bus was available along with the Omni reservation bus, and the speaker would be able to assist in setting this up again. I realized over the last few months that there is a timely path in recommendations to the city council. The next round of recommendations will be for the 2028 fiscal year. What I heard last month was a circulator shuttle bus will be happening to meet the needs of persons who can afford a train running along the Front Range. To get people from Littleton down to Mineral. That'll happen in 2031. We'll get that, you know, people who are paying for that train, we know that that bus needs to happen. My neighbors around me, and I live in affordable housing, already feel unseen and unheard. The apathy is real and warranted. These neighbors tell me I'm a fool to think a bus will be provided for citizens who need extra care. What equity do we bring? I felt I could make a difference for myself and others in keeping some independence by coming to these meetings and pushing for this bus. I am now one of the many people who feels unheard and unseen. Hard not to see local and federal governments as part of the problem. I hope when you or your parents find themselves with a disability, physical, mental health, finances, that they are seen as citizens. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Robin Bernstein. I live at Littleton Crossing. And like Connie, I'm asking once again for the Transportation Mobility Board to implement the circulator bus that is imperative for seniors, disabled people, people without cars or other transportation issues. This simple Littleton bus, which we've had it before, can be implemented today. Now is when we need it, not 2028 or 2031. This bus would take us to the stores, the library, ARC, rec center, doctor's appointments. This would not cost millions. When we have voiced our need and get no response for this safe, simple bus, to me, we are not heard. We are discounted and ignored. It would be an asset for me to get to the store without getting killed by the angry, distracted driver of the car. This simple bus would make it easier to walk or ride bikes in this congested, disconnected city. Maybe if there were more citizens involving themselves in their safety and transportation issues, the Transportation Mobility Board would be convinced. The need would be apparent at that point. We need the circulator bus running 5 days a week, 3 times per day like before. Now, not in 2 years. And then I was at the light rail the other day and I was waiting for the D line when 4 preteen boys did wheelies. They came by me and we did wheelies and were speeding. And I was waiting on the bench. They almost hit me, of course. I said, slow down, kids. You could hit somebody with your e-bikes. And one boy said, we go slower than most other kids. Well, with all that speed, don't hit someone, I said. And if you don't pay attention and you hit someone, you could go to juvenile traffic court for kids. They just stared at me and laughed, ha ha. So, I mean, you know, everybody goes fast, but at the light rail, you know, they do those wheelies, really dangerous. So, I mean, everybody should be riding the bus as well and the light rail to see humanity.
Hello, I'm Barbara Wisniewski, and I've been here before, but haven't been as consistent as my friends over here. And I just want to remind you all as well that I live in Ellison Court, that building, the majority of people there do not drive, and those that do drive only drive in very limited situations, and there's a lot of people that could benefit from the bus we've been talking about for over a year. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
My name is Pam Chadbourne. I live in Blocker, so from here, and I totally agree with the idea of the circulator bus. I'm just going to say I don't think Transportation Mobility Board has the power to do it, and I do think that city management has failed to carry this forward. I don't think our staff has the power to get city management to do that. We have other systemic problems with our city management that are stopping many things that should be done, including the major revision of our horrible new zoning. So, yeah, we have a lot of problems and it's needs a management fix. City council can fix management, so invite you to come there too. Thank you for posting the meeting packet. I love the view graphs from Arapahoe, a great resource to have that data, and great that Arapahoe County is doing this work. I'm glad. Integration between counties and cities is vital, and we need to build more of this. It's great, cool also, staff reference the city council video record, the information, time stamps in your meeting. I'm always amazed. Couple of points. Board and commission members, many of them don't seem to know how to use our public record access online. Great. Train some folks and get them engaged with that. That's good. And also I'm in favor of passenger rail. Maybe not immediately it's going to be used, but we need it in the future. It's definitely popular back east. It's used in Europe. It's good for workers and travelers and visitors. We need it. And it's essential for climate saving transit solutions. Looking at the council video reminded me that John Marchetti, who you often know has sat back there, died of a heart attack in a couple of weeks ago. And council talked about that at their meeting on the 17th. Every member mentioned him, and just wanted you to know that he's an engaged citizen. He wanted to pay attention to what was happening, and he cared about bike and ped trails. He was part of the Cycling Without Age folks, and so just he will be missed. The transportation master plan update that you have on your schedule, I just have to say there's no comprehensive plan update task being discussed in other meetings. Not at council, not at planning commission, not at any other board or commission. That's a fundamental failure, guys. If this TMP is not integrated functionally between housing and work and transit, you're doomed. So you have to push. Another item is, what do we do with our memo to council? Number one is get that comprehensive plan going and get it integrated with the transportation master plan. This is a terrible thing. So, and anyway, I could go on. Thanks. Sorry.
What else, right?
Sorry to hear that about John.
Yeah, I had not heard that about. So, the loss. So, instead of talking about the big highway we're gonna build, I decided, given our presentations here, maybe we should switch to transportation and transit. So we are working down our plan for the year of trying to hit on our few topics. Today is very transit oriented. We are going to talk a little bit about the Arapahoe. And then I hope everybody had a chance to watch the city council meeting, the segment at least that we needed to, and then we're gonna spend about an hour on our information gathering for the circulator bus and transit. We'll talk a little bit about the memo, and then I think that's it, right? Yeah, then just a little master plan update. So.
Oops.
And I apologize, I think I accidentally included the link to that council meeting for 4-H passenger rail. That was really from last month's meeting. So if you didn't watch it last month, I hope you watched it this month.
So I was gonna say that.
Yeah, no, I
Recently
apologize.
that we talked about it, but it's
Yeah, and I,
connected.
yeah, and there is a new council meeting from March 17th, if anyone wants to watch that about 4-H passenger rails. So.
All right. So who is leading us on the Arapago? Would you mind introducing yourselves, by the way, our guests?
Well, first off, thanks for having us. We're excited to present a little bit about the Arapago Transit Connections Plan, led by Arapago County, but involving many of the municipalities. My name is Nick Vanderquack. I'm with Fair and Peers. We're transportation planners and engineers. We're the consultant that's leading the effort with Arapago County, and joined by my colleague Lindsay Gibbs, also with Fair and Peers. So we're gonna talk a little bit about the effort and what we've been looking at, what we've been analyzing, what we're seeing, and then what or some other ways that we can engage, or you can engage with the plan and the effort moving forward. And Ken has been representing Littleton as part of the effort too, so yeah. So yeah, we're gonna go over, I think we've got 20-30 minutes with you all here. We're gonna maybe have a 10-15 minute presentation here, and we'll have some time for some questions and discussion. So with you all. So we're going to talk about the study, give an update there, some of the initial insights. We're in the middle of our first round of community engagement right now. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then some of the next steps, as I was saying. So to kick us off about the study process, if you want to go to the next slide, Kenna. The study is really focused on a few different goals, which I'll go over with you all here. The first one is looking at first and last mile connections around transit nodes, both rail stations and major bus nodes that serve a lot of different destinations, including employment centers. The second goal here, right, is to look at developing policies and an organizational structure to support plan implementation. So doing it at the countywide level is allowing kind of a big picture look at how that can be done, how everyone can coordinate with some of these solutions and recommendations on how those can work. The third goal here is one of the outcomes of the effort is recommendations, some of which may result in a pilot implementation project. Arapago County does have some funding that's been secured for a pilot implementation of one or some of the recommendations that come out of this effort. And so that is a big piece of the recommendations. We're also making a lot of recommendations that won't be funded, but are also very important and will kind of lead the direction in terms of how transit can be improved in Arapago County. And lastly, engaging with stakeholders in the public is a really important part of the effort here. As I mentioned, we're in our first round of engagement. We've got an open survey right now. We've been doing pop-up events and talking to a lot of folks. We're talking to you here tonight and doing the same thing with a lot of different areas. So really looking to educate and inform and also listen to concerns and also ideas. And so thanks for having us here tonight. The study area for this study is the entire urban area of Arapago County. So it includes a large area, right? And there's a lot of different types of Arapago County. So part of what we're looking at is looking at all these areas individually, as well as how they interact with each other and how they interact outside of Arapago County. But it does cover a lot of territory.
Is this a TMB?
This is.
Yeah, I'm just here for like Littleton High School for civics.
Grab a seat.
Right here, join us.
Welcome. So in the study process, we've started in September of last year, and the project goes to the end of this year. So we finished the existing conditions evaluation, which we're going to talk a little bit about what we found with that with you tonight. That included going over all the existing plans and studies, as well as looking at data, analyzing that data, and developing a travel market assessment. So looking where people are traveling, where do they start, where do they end, what are the characteristics of those trips, thinking about how transit can interact or does interact with those trips, and looking at all the different areas that are inside of around. And we're in the middle and kind of moving on to the multimodal analysis component of the project, which is really focused on identifying the needs, where are the transit gaps that aren't served very well, and what are the types of things that we can do for that, right, to fill those gaps and to help to identify what those projects are and how we can move some of those forward in this process. And going through evaluation of those, developing those alternatives and coming up with the criteria for how we can evaluate those projects. And then moving into the final stage here, right, into the recommendations, where we'll finish prioritizing those and move those, the pilot project that I mentioned, move that forward into getting that set up for the next stage of potentially contracting with a vendor or however that recommendation or service would be provided, and looking at how can we fund some of these other ideas and things coming out of this effort. So we've, as I mentioned, have done a lot of analysis. We have some pretty big documents that are almost ready to be posted to the project website. So those will be available if you want to review those soon. They're not quite there yet. Includes a lot of the existing conditions, travel market analysis that we've conducted, but Lindsay's going to give us some a recap of some of that and some initial insights from that.
Thank you, Nick. So as Nick mentioned, if you wouldn't mind progressing, thank you. So our existing conditions evaluation included these two major pieces. So the existing conditions analysis. So this was existing plan review, kind of looking at demographics and land use. Evaluating existing transportation networks, mostly focusing on RTDs, traditional services, as well as kind of evaluating evaluating compatibility with micromobility, first and last mile evaluation. Then we also performed a travel market analysis, and this was a little bit more looking into travel patterns and travel behaviors. So we used big data we used Replica specifically to look at travel within the study area and with respect to the region. So traveling within versus outside the study area, travel within versus outside jurisdictions, travel to station areas, specifically those RTD light rail stations, and then traveling to additional areas of interest. So we examined several factors in the analysis, but we wanted to kind of choose a few important key takeaways to highlight. So the first one is equity. As we know, it's a very important consideration when planning transportation services. So for the purposes of this study, we use the DRCOG Equity Index, and what it shows us is that Littleton has a lower equity need than maybe some other areas, some other jurisdictions in our study area, but recognizing that there are some areas of higher equity need and making sure that we consider that when evaluating solutions. And then we also looked at transit-supportive population and employment density. We looked at both existing and future densities. So this map here is showing future condition 2050. Population and employment density per acre. So according to RTD, more than 12 individual units per acre, so either residents or jobs, is conducive to transit supportive density. So what we're seeing here is that Littleton is mostly falling within that mid-range of population density and employment density per acre, with a couple of pockets of transit supportive density, but kind of keeping in mind that some of that mid-density, some of those mid-density areas might be hit for some of those innovative. And then we also looked at transit frequency. So this is looking at RTD's standard services, bus and rail. It does not include the bird shuttle, and it doesn't include RTD FlexRide. And I know that those RTD stations in Littleton are serviced by the South Jeffco.
Sorry, I'm not familiar with Bird Shuttle. It's Bird Shuttle.
Oh, sure. Burt is Englewood's shuttle. Yes, it's a fixed shuttle route that does a loop downtown.
That was rebranded from the trolley.
I think it was rebranded from the trolley. Yes. Thank you. So really, what the key takeaway from this is that there are some pretty strong, frequent north-south connections through Littleton, but that there are some pretty noticeable east-west gaps. It looks like currently the only service is that 66 route along Arapahoe Road that is running hourly. I also mentioned that we evaluated first last mile access. So we looked at station areas around RTD light rail stations. So we looked at half mile and mile walk sheds and kind of assessed how easy it is to access key destinations either by biking or walking. I mean, what we found is that both downtown and mid-rail stations have very good connectivity to some of these key destinations. A couple of recommendations to perhaps widen sidewalks in a couple of areas just to make those routes a little bit more comfortable for those people biking and walking. And then kind of transitioning into some of those travel patterns that I mentioned. So we looked at trip volumes both within Littleton, so people traveling outside of Littleton to Littleton, as well as people traveling from Littleton to outside of Littleton. So that's what this map is showing. So people, trips starting in Littleton going outside of Littleton. What this shows is that there are trips that are a lot of these trips are heavily concentrated east of the US 85 corridor. And we see a lot of trips to downtown Littleton, Englewood, Sheridan area. And then a little bit farther out, we'll see that there is a nice concentration of trips to the Denver Tech Center, as well as to downtown Denver. And then on the next slide, it shows daily travel to downtown Littleton. So this is just like a downtown interest area. It includes trips that start in downtown Littleton and end in downtown Littleton, as well as trips coming from outside the area. So because downtown Littleton has such a high concentration of mixed land uses, a high number of trips within downtown or walking trips, it's about 46%. And then the map also shows that a majority of trips to the area originate like east and west of the downtown area, but it also shows that the downtown area does pull in some regional trips from other areas. So again, you see downtown Denver highlighted, you see the like Denver South corridor, so around the Denver Tech Center area also highlighted. So really that downtown use has that big regional draw. And then we also looked at daily travel to the Broadway Mineral area. Compared to that previous analysis, you'll see that because there is a little bit of a less diverse mix of land uses here, a lot more of the trip origins are concentrated closer to the station area. And then also kind of a good origin of trips kind of south of that County Line Road in Douglas County. And then finally, on the next slide, you'll see daily travel to all US 85 light rail stations. And this usually is an automated GIF, but that's okay. It would show you that all the different station areas, just due to their different densities and different land use mixes, the travel patterns are very different along the corridor. So all of this is very helpful, and we'll definitely be integrating all of this into the analysis when kind of trying to find some good transit solutions in the area. Now I'm gonna kick it back to Nick to talk a little bit about community engagement.
Yeah, and just to mention this, we're focusing on Littleton here tonight because that's what you all are most interested in, but we did this same analysis on all the light rail stations within Arapahoe County, as well as breaking Arapahoe County into manageable chunks and not focused necessarily on municipal boundaries exclusively because they're so non-logical in some areas, right? But like getting that all together. And so, yeah, lots of information, lots of detail to help to kind of inform what's going on here. So I'm gonna wrap us up with some of the community engagement that's going on. I mentioned this up front, but we have a webpage. I don't know if anyone has visited that yet. If you haven't, please go there. It's arapahoe.gov/arapago. We'll get you there. We've got some information about the project there. We do have a survey on the webpage. It's currently open. It's planned to close at the end of March, although it will be extended at least a week after that. So I'll give you a heads up on that. So there's a little time for you to go ahead and take that survey, or please pass that along to whoever you know that might be interested in giving some feedback on transportation. We want to get as much feedback as possible. And it's very detailed, and there's some questions there where you can drop a pin on a map and give some feedback in that capacity. So curious to hear what you have to say about some of the issues and ideas that you have. We've also got an opportunity to engage, and we have been doing some pop-up events where we've been visiting some different areas, and we had one in Littleton last week, I believe, right? And so we're going to continue to do that. And if you go to the webpage, you can kind of see where the project team is going to be. And we hope to run into people organically there, but also people that want to talk to the project team. It's a good opportunity to do that. We're also focused now on preparing for our first executive committee meeting, which will feature an elected official from each of the municipalities in Arapahoe County, and the other agencies involved will have some executive level participation, where really we've got 3 of these meetings throughout the life of the project. It's going to be focused on really focusing on at that level what can be done to really advance this project and work together. So we'll be doing that at the end of April, which is our first scheduled meeting there. And then we'll have some other in-person regional meetings that information forthcoming on those. Those will be coming this spring, which April, early May is so close. And it might go into June, we'll see. And we'll have a virtual public meeting during the next phase, and then we'll have a final phase. And we'd love to come back to you and present later in the project if you'll have us. If that's interesting to provide an update on some of the outcomes and things that we've been assessing. So I think that's our last slide there. We've got a next step slide. Never mind. We are looking ahead at things I just discussed. And just wanted to, I think the major point here is with your concerns and feedback and other things, happy to have that discussion right now. As I mentioned, Kenna is the contact for the project. She participates in our monthly meetings and can carry forward any ideas or feedback to the group as well as we go through that. So thanks again, and I'll pause here and open it up. If there's any questions on what we presented, or I'm happy to hear those.
I think for the people dialing in, it could be good to say, what is Arapahoe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Describe it.
Arapahoe, yes. It's the clever name. Arapahoe Transit Connections Plan is the official name of the project, and Arapahoe in particular was a branded term that Arapahoe County has come up with. But essentially, it's the effort. It's the name of this plan. It's coming up with recommendations and solutions that are mainly micro transit, so kind of on-demand transit, shuttle focused, and micro mobility, so scooters and bikes. That's kind of the major kind of topic area that we're covering with this effort, but looking at transit in general and transit improvements in general with the effort as well.
With a heavy focus on the micro mobility aspects.
That is a big component as far as the first and last mile access to many of the stations, and in making them more accessible to people who are a little further out to connect. Micromobility makes other connections too. But the focus of this effort is looking a lot at how those can interact, right? In terms of making transit a viable mode to use, and then also using micromobility when you arrive at your destination or using it as part of that.
And I know one of the deliverables we talked about on the PMT today is kind of rules and regulations around micromobility, because I know that's something that we've talked a lot about with e-bikes, and especially like on the Mary Carter Greenway, how does South Suburban regulate that? So that is something that will be developed as part of the study.
Can I just to leverage off the last thing in that premise? What I'm hearing, and tell me if I'm misunderstanding, is a major assumption of this whole thing is that you're going to try to leverage RTD's system better. So RTD system is there, and the idea is how do we use it better by getting everyone first mile, last mile? Am I hearing that right, or am I missing a big piece?
RTD is the only, if not most major transit provider, right? So integrating with that, working with that, recommendations here, could be also just recognizing, hey, we want more service on this line. We would rather have 15-minute frequencies versus 30, or sometimes if you're served at an hourly level, right, that's not really providing great access or not convenient access. It's some access, but this effort will look at those and also provide some feedback for RTD Yeah, you're right. It is generally integrating with RTD and making it more usable.
Are they part of this team?
They are part of the PMT and have been joining the project management team as far as advising, and RTD is going to be going through their own process to relook at the entire RTD system as well. But this is really valuable feedback for them in that process. But yeah, they are our participant here as part of the effort.
I will say, I think we also are identifying gaps, right, of where RTD service maybe is not meeting needs, and whether that is there needs to be more service, or what are the other solutions, whether it's microtransit or something else to fill in those gaps, so.
When you were on the first phase, there was a previous studies where you were looking at all the other stuff. Are you also looking at the stuff that's on the drawing board right now, like the Littleton Boulevard redevelopment and the downtown redevelopment, so that you've got that new data coming in too to help shape the whole thing? Is that being?
Our plan review is largely focused on finished plans or in progress plans, and then we also have our participants. Kenna has brought in some of that information, the relevant information as part of that. So that's why it's been important for us to have that regular monthly meeting. It's become a large meeting with all the people involved. There's a lot of people represented with the different agencies, and but it's important to know what's going on at that level and how that affects some of these things.
So you guys are focusing on the last mile, the micro mobility. That's gonna get a lot of your kind of like small region centers, like getting people grocery off grocery stores and kind of like those services. But is there something between the macro with which RTD provides and the micro, but that kind of like middle area where even possible like cross city, cross community solutions can get people to the major centers where there may be something in, say, Inglewood that Littleton residents go to and vice versa, so that we can kind of fill that gap, or how that gap gets filled, because I know RTD is focusing on more major transit routes, stuff like that, but they're not so much caring about, you know, community and cross-community routes just for a focus of their resources. So how does Arapago help solve that?
Great question. Yeah, I think we haven't gotten to the recommendations process yet, but the process and the project is open to coming up with ideas that help to solve the problems that are identified. And so many times that's looking at short trips, that's looking at an area that doesn't have great fixed route transit coverage that needs to connect into like a station, right? But what you're describing, you know, I think looking at the specific travel patterns between those places, you know, if there's significant travel between those, and it could come up as a recommendation to establish new fixed route service or have a different type of solution there. Typically microtransit, the bigger the zone, the less well it does, or the more intensive it is in terms of how many resources it takes, how many vehicles you need. So it's not necessarily the silver bullet that solves all the problems, but it does solve many first and last mile problems.
Yeah, and it's the middle mile solution that is probably gonna be the next biggest discussion if everything proceeds the way that the system intends, because growing the communities together instead of the communities growing by themselves will create more cooperation and more collaboration. For the use of both the micro as a solution.
Yeah, and I think the distance between some of the different areas that you're talking about isn't that, it's not that far, right? Different communities, but it's not a good way to transit between them, right?
Yep.
So.
And I think that's something too that we, from the city side, have been really excited for this study, knowing that, you know, is some of these solutions, is it just a Littleton solution, or is it a shared regional solution between us and Inglewood or us and Centennial, or, you know, especially because people don't just travel within the city boundaries, right? Like we think about that as professionals, but that's not how people think about it. So, yeah, are these solutions more of a cross-jurisdictional type of situation. Or, you know, maybe the study will say, hey, no, like Littleton, you know, the travel market really does propose that you should have a Littleton eyes solution.
And I'll just mention, I don't know how familiar you all to the county to the south and what they're doing in
I was
micro.
gonna ask you about that, so I'm glad you're bringing it up.
Lone Tree's has the link service that they've been operating for quite a while now, and it's been very successful and well received by them, you know, the people that use it. And Douglas County has taken a role to expand and identify, and we worked on that plan as well, but to expand and identify where microtransit makes sense, where it would be feasible within other areas of the county. So they're working now to expand into Highlands Ranch in some areas, and then I just heard a couple weeks ago it's going to expand for a year-long pilot in Castle Rock, connecting Castle Rock to Lone Tree. It's a very large zone, kind of talks to what you're talking about. Maybe not the lowest cost passenger price per rider. It's one of the metrics used to evaluate productivity. So there's a lot of things to think about when you think about solutions, right? In terms of cost and how easy it is to use, how much people like it, right? So,
Can we shamelessly steal some of your intellectual horsepower? So if you I was looking at your heat maps, which I thought were really interesting. Based upon those, you've heard us talk a little about the idea of a circulator bus. Is there anything you see in those that says a circular bus is a great idea or a circular bus is a horrible idea or anything in between?
I want to know more about the areas you're looking to serve before fully answering that question, and not knowing specifically what you're trying, exactly what
Well,
you're
this is
trying.
total pop quiz time. I get it. Like
A solution that is more on-demand focused, like microtransit, might be a good solution if you have a lot of different destinations within kind of a smaller area, right? To serve all of those, and it's a shared ride, smaller vehicles that are very flexible, and you can call them up in an app and easily. It's like an Uber, but it's lower cost or free, depending upon how that's structured, right? So that is one thing to look at in terms of filling that gap. Another, if it's more of like a fixed, I want it to run on a certain road and always do the exact same thing, you know, shuttle can do very well and be more productive, but also it has pros and cons depending upon what solution you might look at.
So kind of building on that, and it's just something to heavily consider is like, one thing that we're engaging in, not only our community, but many others, is we have both kind of like a middle age, a young group, but we also have an older group that, one of the things that is a big benefit for them is something that they don't have to engage in new technologies and new techniques, because just that is how their life is, but also has a very low cost of participation and things. And commonly, like, there's a lot of communities where a lot of the older individuals will live in and stuff like that as progression happens. But is there a solution that can help better serve their needs as well? Because they might have a more unique demand than an on-demand going to things that are of interest, but they need to have a routine to go to the doctor, you know, once a week, go to the grocery store once a week, go to like other things that they have to, but they may not know how to operate the new app. They may not have the newest phone device, or, you know, whatever the next technology is.
I'm not sure if this, how helpful this is, but I do know that most of those services, you don't necessarily need an app. They do have a phone number that you can call in order to kind of request rides. But I will say, like, I don't necessarily have an answer to your question, but I will say that that is very common feedback that we've gotten during engagement. So that's definitely something that we're going to be seriously evaluating. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to that.
I was just going to mention that Aurora currently, or recently, just started Aurora Rides, which is a senior-focused microtransit service. So the eligibility, you have to be 60 plus to use it, but it's got a fixed zone in the denser area of Aurora along there that covers and this type of service for seniors specifically. They just started that service. So I don't know stats in terms of how much it's used now, but
You know who they contract that service through?
it's the
I think it's the,
Not via mobility, just via.
We have about 2 more minutes of this and try to move on. You want us to have a last question?
I was just gonna say the Douglas County thing with all of the wind crest, you got 4,000 seniors sitting there just outside our boundaries. We probably should figure out how to get them to Minden Station.
They probably want to buy stuff.
You think?
And I know the Highlands Ranch, Link on Demand does, service Mineral Station.
Yeah.
One thought I had is, it seems like for the micromobility in terms of like, I order a ride, and a person comes and picks me specifically up and brings me to my very bespoke route. It seems like there's never efficiency of scale in that, like the more we invest in it, it pretty much stays very expensive. And we never get to a point where the cost can start to reduce if adoption starts to really pick up. And so how do you all think of, that as a solution? Like in Castle Rock, like a rural part of Castle Rock, it's really the only solution that could happen. But it feels like, and I don't know if the graph was saying like 12, was the level of density, that was needed, but I've seen, like, there's really small villages that have public transit, and so it's like, I think a lot of the issue in Littleton is that almost everyone has a car because our environment is built out where you have to have a car, and so but in the communities where they say, we don't want that to be a defining attribute of our city where you have to have a car, with lower density, they can still have successful service, so it's, how do you all think of that in terms of,
microtransit is never gonna be cheaper than fixed route transit on a cost per ride basis. It's more expensive. And the more you use it, the more it costs, right?
yes.
Paying per trip. It does fill a gap, especially in areas that fixed route doesn't work very well, or you'd have to have a lot of different fixed routes to serve an area, especially when streets start to get curvilinear or where there's just other issues, right? Often microtransit will work well when it's overlaid with fixed route so that you can have shorter trips that you then transfer to a fixed route where you couldn't walk to that, right? It provides that connection. But yeah, people love microtransit. It's convenient, it's easy. Douglas County loves it as a solution. It's not gonna be cheaper though. That's just as part of the more people that are using it. I mean, there's a point where if you are routinely filling up the vehicle with shared rides, it gets less expensive on a cost per rider basis, but it's still more expensive than a fixed route service would be with a good number of
Per rider.
Per rider.
There's obviously if you don't have the scale.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of fixed cost in having your fixed route.
Right.
And you have to get above a certain amount of ridership in order for that to start making sense.
and I feel like there's also, I know that we kind of talk about like point to point, like I tell you exactly where to pick me up and you take me exactly where I want you to. Like that, I think is the most common form of microtransit, but there are like different levels of intensity also. So like you could do like a deviated route, which is almost like how the Flex Ride runs. So like it has a fixed route, but if you want it to take you somewhere else, like it'll deviate from the route and drop you off like either at your destination or a little bit closer. And then there's also models where like it is a microtransit zone, like you can go anywhere you want, except like you need to be picked up or dropped off at certain points. And then I think Atlanta runs that model, if I remember correctly, and it's been very effective. But I think when it's kind of like a similar question, right? It's like, well, if I'm trying to help people who have mobility issues, like get to doctor's appointments, like can they walk the quarter mile to get to their pickup point? And then you kind of end up with some of those like trade-off questions too. So there are other models that are out there, but Yeah, just to throw that out there.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. You know, I think in the next presentation, we'll talk kind of about, you know, there's the, especially we start talking about like paratransit, you know, transit specifically for seniors and people with disabilities. You know, there's the like door-to-door model or point-to-point, right? Which is, yeah, you get picked up right at your door. Sometimes it's, I forget what it's called. You guys would probably know. It's like they pick you up inside your house and then take you to the transit. But yeah, the different models, there's the different aspects that we have trade-offs, right? And especially, you know, when it's a fixed route or, you know, a traditional type of transit system, the first last mile becomes even more important, right? That we need to, we have sidewalks that you can get to the bus stop. I think we all know that in Littleton, many situations where no, you cannot. And so it's, yeah, having to balance all of those and figure out what our priorities are and how we're going to accomplish all of our goals.
Okay. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you for coming.
Having us. Yeah, as I mentioned, we're happy to come back later in the process and talk again specific things, and even if it's kind of bringing some of those solutions to you all, I'm sure that will happen. So, thank you.
And I know you'll have at least another, what, like 10 survey responses by tomorrow?
That's great.
Can I ask a question? What is your community, what kind of community feedback are you getting?
We still have, the survey's open, so we haven't fully processed all of it yet. But we have been hearing things, yeah, kind of consistent with what we're talking about here in terms of priorities. Some of the pop-up events that we've had, we've heard from people who are looking for, you know, better connections to get to transit stations. We've heard some ideas about, we heard from one person who works at Centennial Airport and has a 1.2 mile walk from his transit stop to his job. And hearing those personal stories is very powerful when you think about improving people's lives and offering options that might do that. So we'd love to hear feedback like that if you have some of that. So please take that survey. Read all those. All right. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so the next hour or so, we are informing ourselves in transit. I apologize, I don't know who's leading this section.
It's me.
You? The best. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yes, and this was a good tee up, I think, to this conversation. You know, we talked at kind of the, gosh, was it the last meeting or 2 meetings ago when we did the whole planning of, you know, kind of taking each of the subjects in 3 parts. And so this is really meant to be an introduction. So we'll think about next steps and kind of where we go and take this conversation moving forward. And I guess I wanted to just start this out and just like, let's start at the very bottom of just what are transit options, right? What is the types of transit out there? What are potentials? So I put together, you know, kind of some different slides talking about these options, and some are very relevant to Littleton or exist in Littleton. Some maybe be a little out there, but I figured might as well talk about everything, put everything on the table at this point. So local rail options, you know, we have light rail. This is a picture of our current light rail. When RTD constructed light rail in Littleton, they hadn't embarked on their commuter rails, which is the next one. And it is interesting because with light rail versus commuter rail and the distances and, you know, there's all these like specifications. I'm curious, and I don't know the answer to this, if our Southwest line would still be light rail or if it would have been commuter rail if it was built today. I don't know. I'm looking at you. I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know about the Southwest Rail, but I know with the Southeast Rail, that with that one, if that were built up to today's standards, that one should have been commuter rail. So, I mean, we could probably find that answer.
Yeah, probably.
But it's probably a good assumption or very plausible.
And I say that meaning nothing's gonna happen. It's just, you know, there's the evolution of how RTD developed, right? So light rail and commuter rail, at least in Denver, operate pretty similarly. They use different trains, right? The commuter rail trains, like the one here, is level boarding, and so you don't have to go up and down the steps, which create, you know, a lot of mobility issues. Or if you have a bike, you know, it just creates some more complications when it comes to that. But commuter rail is, you know, technically longer distances, could go faster. larger spaces between, distances between stations. We also have a subway or metro. This is an example from London. Lots of major cities across the world have, an underground or a metro. Never say never. However, the likelihood of Denver region getting a metro is probably pretty low at this point. However, like LA is still building out their metro system now, especially with the Olympics coming in 2028. They're adding new lines. New York City continues to add some new lines as well. So never say never, but it is, pretty cost intensive to build out those infrastructures in built out cities. And then lastly, we have trams and streetcars, which I'll actually talk a little bit later about the history of streetcars in Littleton. This is an example from Vienna. And I think, from the traveling I've done, and, I think most of you know, like I lived abroad in college, and Vienna was a great example of they had every single type of transit options, right? They have the underground, they have the S-Bahn or the Schnellbahn, which is the fast train, and that's like the commuter train. They have trams that, are street level that you can hop on and off that go to a lot of the tourist areas, and they have buses. So they have that wide, and they have, inner city rail as well. So a wide breadth of options that really meet all of the needs of the community. At least I felt like it met my needs when I lived there and didn't have a car, right? I didn't have any other option. So those are more local rail options. Inner city rail options, at least in the United States, we have Amtrak as the main service provider. There's the California Zephyr, which services Denver Union Station. And then there's also high-speed rail, which there's some of that in the US. However, we are definitely not on the cutting edge of high-speed rail internationally. So there's the bullet train in Japan. There's also the maglev in Shanghai, which I forget the speed at which that can go. It's like crazy, crazy fast, right? So
Super speed.
yeah,
300 miles per hour. Yeah.
insane. So very, very advanced technology. With front range passenger rail, what we're looking at is probably using Amtrak as a service provider. From the council meeting, there was a slide that I don't have on me right now that talked about the speed at which front range passenger rail is expected to go.
79.
79, 80. So it's not technically high speed rail, that doesn't qualify. And that was chosen due to the cost implications to make it high speed rail were a lot higher, and due to a lot of the topography and station locations, it wouldn't be able to get to that high speed to really make that level of investment worth it. And so that's why they went with about an 80 mile per hour speed for that. So now looking at local transit options, bus options. So we have our fixed route bus that we know and love. That's what RTD service is. We are starting in the Denver region to have more bus rapid transit. Colfax BRT is going to be the first example in the Denver region. They're actively building out that corridor now. I live 2 blocks from that corridor, so I'm very excited for when that's built out. And I know the businesses along Colfax, so I'll be very excited when that construction starts. But the whole idea of bus rapid transit is really how do we operate buses more like rail? And so there's less upfront capital costs, but we're still operating it how a light rail or a subway would operate, right? So really frequent headways. This is an example. So Colombia is like the creator of bus rapid transit, or really at the forefront. So this is in Bogota. So you can see just the amount of people that are, going to load on these buses, coming, very, very frequent 5-minute headways, minimally, dedicated lanes typically, so that, it's on its own path. You're not sitting in traffic. And that was something that we looked at through the Broadway corridor study of what could BRT look like along the Broadway corridor. And I'll talk a little more about BRT implementation in the region later on. But this is kind of a more innovative solution just because of the cost implications with light rail or with commuter rail, and how can we use existing infrastructure or roadway infrastructure and really redesign it to fit more of a BRT model.
I read a book that highlighted the mayor of Bogota's approach for this.
Yeah.
And he was saying, if we have buses passing cars, people will stop bringing their cars and they will ride the bus.
Yes.
If the bus is sitting in traffic with the car, no one is going to switch to a bus.
Right.
So that was like the defining the defining principle that he had is like, we have to have the bus passing the people.
Yeah.
And if we do, we will remove cars from the road to get those people on bus.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, I think with the headways too, and this was something, again, when I lived in Europe and in Vienna, my subway that I took to class every day, it came every 2 to 3 minutes during peak hour. Or, the peak time. And so if you missed a train, no sweat, literally another one's about to pull up, right? And so that's really the hallmark of really great transit is that you don't even have to look at a schedule, right? That's not how transit operates here. I know, Matt, you've talked a lot about your experience taking the Broadway bus up to Denver and,
8 minutes to get to Alameda and Broadway from Littleton Village.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and if it's 30-minute headways or 60-minute headways, if you miss that bus, you're missing, you can't, it's not as dependable to use for work or for school, right? Or it just takes a lot more planning in advance, and so there's going to be less people choicing into that, right? And there's a whole thing with transit of choice riders versus transit dependent riders. RTD, especially their light rail system, has been more focused, I think, on the choice riders and not necessarily transit dependent riders. And so that is, I think, always something that we have to balance too with any of our decisions. There's also hub and spoke models or more, which is more of what RTDs, especially light rail system, is the hub and spoke, really having one hub, which I know we've talked about before too, rather than more of a blanket model. And there's benefits and negatives to both, right? A hub and spoke, technically you should be able to have more frequency because people are going to the hubs and the different spokes, whereas a more blanket model is kind of like the whole equity versus equality conversation. It's more equality across, but is there equity with who's trying to access transit? Can you have as much frequency, those types of things?
Yeah, one last point is I was in Utah this last week or a couple days ago, yesterday, and Provo, Oregon had a bus rapid transit because they have Utah Valley University and Brigham Young University that each have 30,000 students, 7 miles apart. And they created a bus rapid transit along University Parkway. It's wonderful. It's centered in the lane. It has dedicated, things. They have it it's fast and tons of people are using that now, which it was wild to see Utah do a transit forward, project like that, but they did it incredibly fast, it did it really, really well. So it was pretty impressive to see.
That's awesome.
Look at the system they've got for the Olympics, the fast tracks in downtown Salt Lake.
Yeah.
That working really fast.
Yep, yes.
And they've got the banger that runs from Salt Lake all the way to Ogden.
Yeah, the front runner. Yeah.
So, yeah, they've got it together.
Yeah, yes.
And I guess, and it is something, if we don't have an answer, we can punt it, but with the Olympics coming in a few years, how is Littleton gonna take advantage of that?
I do not have an answer for you.
The Olympics coming to Utah?
Denver,
Oh, the Olympics are coming to Denver. I didn't even know that.
is that, or what's the big event coming to Denver in 2 years?
I don't know.
It's not I'm pretty sure, I'm 90+% sure it's not the Olympics.
Yeah, it's not the Olympics are going to LA in 2 years.
And Salt Lake soon again as well. Yeah.
Yeah, the winter. But I think that's 10
I
out.
don't know that.
Yeah, I think there's a
Festival in DNC. Sundance is coming.
Yeah, Sundance is coming to Boulder. Yeah. I know, and I don't know when the World Cup is happening.
That has a couple spots here.
I don't think Denver's one of them though.
Oh.
Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know.
It's all over North
All right,
America.
Shane's gonna look it up.
Yeah.
Moving on for other local transit options. So the circulator bus, this is the example of the BERT in Inglewood. It used to be, I think, branded as the Inglewood Trolley. They've rebranded it as the BERT. So a circulator bus is more of that fixed route in a really defined area. So this goes throughout downtown Inglewood area. And then you have the on-demand transit or micro transit, which is that door-to-door service. So this is the Lone Tree Link. I think it was about a year ago that Dan came and presented to you all about the Lone Tree Link. As Nick and Lindsay indicated, Douglas County went through a similar study, a transit connection study, just like Arapahoe County is going through. And so it is cool to see that they went through that study and there was recommendations and they're now implementing those recommendations. So obviously different counties, different jurisdictions. but I think that's a cool way to see, like, they did the planning study and now they're implementing. Douglas County is all in on the micro transit, as Nick mentioned. So started in Lone Tree, expanded to Highlands Ranch earlier this year, or I guess last year. Now expanding into Castle Rock and Parker. But good points I'll mention in the last presentation though is like the cost per rider is really, really high. And it's always going to be higher than, people sharing a 40-foot bus.
It's providing a chauffeur for.
It's subsidized Uber and Lyft.
Yes, yeah.
However, there is that point though about the first last mile, right? It is door to door. So especially if you have mobility issues,
Super important.
it's super convenient, right? We're not asking you to walk multiple blocks on a street that maybe isn't comfortable to walk on or has 2'7" sidewalks that we have all over Littleton. And so I think with whenever we talk about transit, we're also talking about being pedestrians, right? They're one and the same. And so to improve our transit network, we also need to improve our pedestrian network in order to ensure people can actually get to the transit. Intercity bus options. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Bustang. I actually have a map later on that shows the whole Bustang service area across the state. And so this is CDOT run, and originally started as like a commuter service, trying to fight congestion along I-25. And so it was really just up along I-25, but they have expanded across the state. So you can get a lot of places along Bustang that you don't have to drive, which is really awesome. And, CDOT has really committed to dedicating funding sources towards this and making sure that they're expanding to communities across the state. So not just, mountain tourist areas, but also they've expanded up to Sterling and Lamar and other places in the state that need access.
At the risk of I'm gonna take a detour.
Yeah, that's fine.
A Matt style detour.
Yeah.
Do you know, is there a legal reason or any other reason why Mustangs can't drive on the shoulder? There's lots of traffic.
Oh, yes.
Bogota, like if
Uh-huh.
on a Saturday morning,
Mm-hmm.
I saw that Mustang just driving by at 25, 30 miles an hour up the
Yeah.
shoulder. So
Well, to Matt's point with the Bogota mayor,
Yes.
right? If people see buses going past, they're gonna take it. If buses are stuck in the same I-70 traffic,
why would I do that?
why would you take a bus on I-70 if you can be in your car?
So
Right?
do you know, is there a reason why they can't do it?
Yes, it's because the they're called peak period shoulder lanes, I believe, through Clear Creek County, are not wide enough to accommodate the size of a bus.
Seriously.
That was the reason why.
It seems like a small amount of road they could add, to get it.
So, and this is where, my job gets really fun. It's political. Clear Creek County is very adamantly against widening I-70. They already feel that, I-70 has taken very valuable real estate in a very narrow valley.
Yeah, it is a scar through the city.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Talk about, big barriers. Like we talk about Santa Fe being a huge barrier to Georgetown or to Idaho Springs of having I-70 there. So I don't know all of the answers, but I do believe, and this is where planning has to come in, right? Those peak period shoulder lanes were built before Bustang came in. And so those two things did not align, and what a missed opportunity. So never say never. I mean, I think, probably eventually, I-70 through that area will be maybe reimagined or maybe widened to accommodate that. I know CDOT's response to that was to create Bustang Pegasus, which I don't know if that still exists, and I should probably know that answer, which is using passenger vans that do fit in the peak period shoulder lanes.
I think it still exists.
I think it still exists. So that was kind of their interim solution of like, okay, if we can't get the buses on there, then let's do Pegasus, which I think is mostly during like peak period. So winter and summer, maybe just winter, to be able to use those lanes, because that's, again, what a missed opportunity, right? Like, talk about why we need to talk to each other in projects and really think like the full gamut of options before.
There's no legal reason, it's just purely an infrastructure issue at this point.
Yes.
Sorry,
No, you're fine. Well, and
off the detour.
you're good. And, Mustang has also worked with, also event access. I know they used to do like Broncos rides from like Fort Collins down to Denver and some of those things. I think some of those services have changed throughout the years or have been limited. They did start snow staying, which was, so how many stayings can you create, you know, fun branding. They created snow staying that was specifically partnering with ski resorts to bring people to those ski resort towns. I think the big thing with that though too is like it takes you to the town and then you still have to access the local transit. And so again, how, if people are choosing between driving and taking transit, are you gonna choose your point to point service, or are you gonna choose a service that you have to get to a station, take the bus, get off the bus, transfer to local transit? I think in an ideal world, yes, we would all want to do that and it's so easy to navigate, but
The snowboard.
with the snowboard.
Skis, yes. Yes.
So there's nuance to it, right? Of how do we make that the preferred option? How do we make that you know, of course I want to take the bus and I don't mind having to transfer 1 or 2 or 3 times, right? The way that we're currently structured, everything relates back to land use and transportation are so combined. It's a work in progress right now, I would say. Moving on, we have Greyhound and FlixBus. I added FlixBus because it was like my favorite bus to take in Europe, and they have expanded to the US, but they're very much overlapping with Greyhound, so it's really just Greyhound buses. But you know, it's like the classic intercity buses that we know, and that goes nationwide, whereas Bustang is just within the state of Colorado. Moving on to specialized transit options, so paratransit. So any public transit agency in the US, if you are providing any fixed route service, you have to provide equal paratransit access for people who have mobility devices and need specialized transit. So there's lots of different models of paratransit. RTDs is called Access-a-Ride. You also have non-emergency medical transportation, NEMT. A lot of these are subsidized through federal grants or money and provide services to those. And that is more of that door-to-door service, right? You have the circulated bus, which we already talked about, and on-demand transit. Those were doubles, so I'll skip those. You know, maybe not super related to Littleton, but I decided to add them. Monorail. You have the normal monorail, you have suspended monorail. The suspended monorail, this is in Germany and has existed for like 130 years or something like that, so kind of crazy. Ferries, I don't think we're gonna have ferries in Littleton. That is another fun transit option. And then you have your scenic railways, which we do have a lot in Colorado. Not really for transit, more for fun. And a lot of times were historic passenger railways or industrial railways that have now been turned into more tourist options. Other transit options, escalators being, I guess, maybe not just transit, but more of that, like how to, I guess all of these are more like, how do you work with your topography, right? So like escalators, this is an example in Barcelona. I know a lot of other places in Europe have them, South America, with topography, you know, how are we creating better mobility for people that maybe aren't going to be able to walk in up and down stairs, or, you know, an elevator is not always the most cost efficient or easy option to install. Funiculars are again kind of more touristy, but really with steep inclines. Gondolas is more of an innovative transit option that a lot of South American cities have used because of their big topography challenges. And then water taxis, obviously. I don't think we're gonna have water taxis up and down the South, but places like Victoria, British Columbia, they do have them.
So we could use a gondola to get across Santa Fe? A gondola on Santa Fe on.
From Main Street over to Echo Star.
You know, it would be cool. I love a gondola. Yeah. I was telling Shane in grad school, my pitch in every project was like, what if we had a gondola? It really got turned down, but you never.
So Utah is actually exploring a gondola for the ski resorts, because they're incredibly narrow canyons that are just 15 minutes up. And it's a huge discussion point there, yeah.
Well, or if any of you have been to Telluride, you know, the free gondola in Telluride that connects Telluride and Mountain Village is amazing and so heavily used by obviously tourists, but people getting to work every day. So you don't have to, it takes like 50 minutes or however many minutes to get there by car, but you can just take the gondola up and over the mountain. So they are pretty innovative. I don't know the costing of gondolas necessarily, but
One little Cotton Creek, last time I heard was like, it's gonna be like in the billions, like.
Super expensive.
Yeah. I mean, but rail
Yeah.
is also,
The one in Glenwood couldn't, I mean, that's private enterprise, that would, the one that runs from
The
downtown
amusement park.
Glenwood, that goes up to the amusement park on top.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, more for like tourist things, but can be used for transit. Other, and these are more, I say transit options, but dockless mobility, micromobility or docked micromobility. And we talked about that as part of the transit, Arapago transit project. Denver used to have B-Cycle and Boulder. I don't know if Boulder still does, or if they finally got rid of it, of a docked micromobility, whereas Denver has now gone to the dockless, which, comes up with its own set of issues of where people are leaving their micromobility. I think the companies have gotten a lot better in recent years that you have specific zones. You can't just leave it on the sidewalk. You have to take a picture. And this is an example in Denver where like you have specific parking spaces that the micromobility has to go into.
Denver just changed their vendor.
Oh yeah, it's been a whole thing.
Do you know, in Denver, you have to drop it in those zones, or is it incentivized if you drop it in those
I think
zones?
it's incentivized. I don't know if it's required. And I guess I don't know. I do take, scooters sometimes or the e-bikes. I don't know if you try to just leave it in the middle of the sidewalk, if it won't let you or not, because I never do that. I always put it not on the sidewalk. So maybe once I'll try and just report back and then move it.
What did it do? Like is there a handcuff that you?
It won't end your ride, so you just pay.
You have to pay for it, but
Yeah,
you
in
can still do
Washington-
it, you just.
In Washington DC, it wouldn't end the ride.
Yeah. DC has a really great docked bike system.
San Francisco did too.
Yeah.
It was amazing to sit there and just watch people going to every station, because they had a bike, they had to dock and they couldn't find an open spot.
And that is the downside of a docked system is you have to find an open station. Sometimes it can be hard. Go ahead.
So like kind of a technology question, we have a lot of the systems put in like robo delivery, a little bit of robo taxi, but could there be a solution, like say you want to get from downtown Littleton to the light rail station of like a fixed, takes like 3 or 4 passengers on a fixed route, on a fixed schedule that people could board, but it would be kind of like an automated system?
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know if I have that in here. No, I think that's something I intended to add and forgot to. Panasonic, gosh, this was years ago. So I know the Panasonic, they call it almost like a lab, like a city laboratory, right?
Out by DIA.
Yeah.
There's a name for it, I can't remember, but yeah.
Yeah, and so they were, I know, experimenting with an automated shuttle called Easy Mile. And I do believe Golden has their ore digger route. It's a shuttle service or circulator bus for mine students. And they did pilot, I don't know the status, but with autonomous vehicles with that. I know when I toured the Panasonic facility, and granted this was probably pre-pandemic at this point, they were struggling with, because of the safety requirements, which we all obviously want in autonomous vehicles, it couldn't get over like 5 miles per hour.
Yeah.
I would assume in, the 7 years that I think I probably toured that facility that they've improved upon that, but that's something I can definitely look up and report back to you all.
Yeah. It's called the Panasonic Smart City Innovation Showcase. It's a living lab, 400-acre site up by the airport.
Oh, here in Denver.
Yeah.
Oh, I love to go to that.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff with like air quality monitoring too, and then like the Easy Mile, and there was just a lot of kind of anything smart city related they were looking at. But yeah,
I would say something else to keep in mind is like not one that navigates the city as is, but like something where you build a lower cost, kind of like fixed track for it. That eliminates a lot of those variables, which would allow a lot of safety concerns to be elevated to a point.
Right, right. Yeah, just more upfront capital costs to go along with that, right?
But if it doesn't have to have the load of like a light rail, your infrastructure costs would be significantly lower.
Yes.
Right, right. But then it kind of gets back into the like micro mobility of cost per ride, yeah. All the things to think about, right? You know, rickshaw, tuk-tuk, obviously kind of a fun thing in here, but it is, you know, I guess the reason I'm putting these in here, what are kind of outside the box potential solutions, right? And in a lot of other cultures across the world, they do have more like smaller type of almost like micro transit or micro mobility type of things. That we just don't have as much, at least in the US or in Denver. You know, I think like the bike taxis or rickshaws, you know, you see them a lot at like sporting events, you know, around the Pepsi Center or Ball Arena, excuse me, or concerts, those types of things. But could they be a more daily type of transit option? I don't know.
Electric tuk-tuks.
Electric tuk-tuks, yeah.
So on the idea of alternatives, this is where I'm gonna be probably gonna be like the stick in the mud on this one. So, you know, the other thing that we should probably think about is as we start moving towards more and more autonomous vehicles, and Denver has now picked up Waymo. That could have a substantial impact on all of this, right? I mean, I was reading recently that the average car in the United States is used less than 5% of the time. So when we.
Yeah, it sits there all day.
It just sits in one place. You drive it to work, you park it, it sits there all day, or you park it on the street and it sits there all day. And so if you start thinking about if you have autonomous vehicles and we get to the point where it is a substantial portion of our automotive fleet, you need significantly fewer vehicles. You have significantly less traffic, and you have significantly more micro mobility.
And you get some room.
What's that?
Right,
You've got some room.
You get more room. Yeah, absolutely.
right.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, you know, I think that's the big thing that, you know, we've kind of touched on of like, yeah, the cost of parking, right, and the cost of a parking space to, it's really just storage space that the city subsidizes.
Yeah, which is land use.
Which is land use, and is that the best use of our land? Storage for vehicles?
Yeah.
So I don't know what the timeline for that is. I doubt it's in the next year or two, but that is something that will more than likely make whatever we decide in this look kind of antiquated at some point.
I work every day helping those companies test their robotics. I don't think it's a year or two away. But yes.
6 months?
No. And the Waymo does operate and Waymo does really well, but it's gonna be challenging, yeah.
I think as a add-on to your suggestion though, the article in the Denver Post on Sunday talking about the high cost of acquisition and maintenance of a vehicle is moving that
Yes.
Oh, yes.
totally off the table.
It's insanity, yeah. The average person pays $10,000 per vehicle per year if you take all the costs, you know, and then so someone's like, well, transit costs money. I'm like, I would much rather spend $200 a month or, on.
Well, the problem becomes, and this is where the transit thing comes in versus cars and where something like autonomous vehicles would make a difference.
Yeah.
Is that a lot of people, they think of their car as independence.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So unless you live in a place like New York or Vienna,
Yeah.
where you literally have transit coming by every 2 or 3 minutes and you don't have to plan it, don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
It is truly independence.
Well, it's interesting, and I think I've maybe talked about this with this group. When I did my thesis in grad school, I was looking specifically at how students get to school. So not transit specifically, but we did a comparative study between Denver and Rotterdam in the Netherlands, which Rotterdam historically was a more car and still is compared to like in Amsterdam or, other cities in the Netherlands, more auto oriented. However, the Netherlands as a whole has just done so much investment over the last 50 years in transit, especially bicycle infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure, to really try to move the needle away from such a car oriented society. We specifically chose neighborhoods that we're trying to compare apples to apples, even though, they're not. And I think the biggest takeaway, from the study that we did was really that cultural piece of, in the US and in Netherlands, you could be the same distance away and you could, you know, on paper have the same types of facilities. Comfort comes into play, right? And that's more, you know, subjective of how you feel. But really it was about the like cultural just independence of students in the Netherlands and just the overall culture of how people get around, right? And in the US, we are very independent oriented, right? Yeah, we want our car, we want to be able to go when we want to go. We don't want to depend on a transit route. The independence for kids is a lot lower though, because there was like, that was our major finding was that kids in the Netherlands, you know, at a much younger age, parents felt comfortable letting.
Yeah, they have more independence there.
They have more independence.
Yeah, anywhere on a bike, yeah.
Right, which is kind of opposite of like how I think, you know, Americans think of like, oh, with my car, I'm independent, but because of that culture,
Yeah.
we don't feel comfortable letting our kids walk and bike to school on their own.
Until you're 16, you're completely dependent here, and your parents often won't even permit you to ride your bike anywhere, you know, so you're
Yeah.
stuck in your suburban street.
Right, so kind of an aside, but I guess all of that to say is that like the cultural piece to all of this is such a major component to it. And so I know we've talked about this with like Safer Streets Littleton as well, and just, you know, driver behaviors and all of those things that it's infrastructure and it's cultural and behavior shift. And so they go hand in hand, and, you know, there's sometimes it's the same method to get to the same goal, or sometimes it's different methods. And so we have to kind of balance both of those.
Just to keep you
Yeah, I'm being long-winded.
about 20 more minutes, so.
Okay. This was a fun map I found that just combined Mustang and Amtrak, and it makes it look like a subway map. I just thought this was fun, so I wanted to share it with you all. So this is, you know, maybe not geographically accurate, but shows all of the routes across the state, which is very fun. So if you can see, and oh, yep, there's Pegasus on here. Yeah, Mustang goes a lot of places. This is the actual Mustang map that is geographically correct. And they do talk about some of their seasonal services. So you get Broncos games, Mustang to Estes during like the people season for the elk, Rams route, and then snow staying as well. And then this is just the Greyhound map. And so there's more localized service and then more regional service across the US.
A lot of South Dakota options, huh?
No, there's not. Okay, so now talking about Littleton specifically and a little bit about the history of transit in Littleton. You know, Littleton has had access to the railroads, you know, from a very long time. 1871 was when the first passenger railroad came. Learned some very interesting things. There was a very popular, they called it the Uncle Sam route because it serviced Fort Logan and Denver. But at its peak, Littleton saw over 30 passenger rail trains per day.
We regressed.
We sure have. And so there was two main railroads. There was the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, and then there was also the Atchison, Topeka, Santa Fe Railroad. All of these, you know, morphed into the Rio Grande, the Santa Fe, the different railroads. You know, but at one time in Littleton, you could hop on the train and there was, you know, pretty direct access to Leadville during the mining boom, but like all over the state, and you could get cross country through passenger rail. So it's funny that we're back at the place where we're talking about passenger rail when this existed over 100 years ago. Moving on, we did have electric streetcars and horse cars. I don't know if you know what a horse car is. I just found out about this. The horse car didn't operate that long in Littleton. It was mostly in Inglewood, but basically.
Horse ride. Horse gets to ride the car.
Yes, because the streetcar didn't have enough power to get up some of these big hills, like the topography issues. So the horse would have to carry the car up the hill, and then it would hop on the streetcar to ride back down the hill. And it said it would take 15 minutes to get up the hill and only 3 minutes to get back down the hill. So this was the Sherilyn, and it operated up and down Broadway in Inglewood for many years.
We're a society, yeah.
Yeah. However, Littleton did have a streetcar. This is at Prince and Main, and this is a map that shows where it is. The report that I found this in was actually written by Nick, who presented the first
Nice.
Yeah, the first presentation, which is fun. So yeah, there was a streetcar that connected all the way up to Inglewood, and then the Inglewood streetcar connected on Broadway all the way up to Denver. So you can get up and down Denver. But yeah, went along Littleton, or gosh, I guess that wasn't Littleton Boulevard. But went through downtown. And then the top photo is the streetcar did connect over. wanted it to go all the way to, you know, like the mountains. They only got like past the South Platte River, but this is a picture of the streetcar over the South Platte, which is funny. Very different safety standards back in the day.
Yes.
The streetcar operated, so from 1907 to 1926, they were replaced with buses just due to cost. Apparently, the Denver and South Platte Railway that operated the streetcar in Littleton, the city decided they wanted to pave Broadway and asked for the streetcar company to help pay for it, and they said no. And then they went out of business and was replaced by buses.
We've seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit, so it was a conspiracy. Yeah.
We actually have a chunk in our office of the streetcar rail from Main Street. When they did a water project, one of our inspectors grabbed a couple chunks of the streetcar rail, so it's cool.
So, you know, once streetcars were done, we got buses. There was lots of different transit agencies across the Denver region. They all consolidated into what we now know as RTD, or the Regional Transportation District, back in the late 60s. And I think it was created in 69 and then operations started in like 71, 72. And RTD started expanding with light rail in the 90s. Littleton, I think the Southwest line was originally built between downtown, like the you know, central downtown stations to Broadway and Alameda, or maybe Broadway and I-25, and then was extended down all the way to Littleton Mineral in 2000. And then as part of the big fast tracks bill, or ballot measure that was passed in 2004, there is a Southwest extension that would connect into Highlands Ranch. Currently, there are 4 unfinished fast track lines, so the Southwest is one of them. At this time, there's really no plans to extend the Southwest line.
Last I heard, the cost of the bridge alone was over $100 million.
Yeah, the most updated cost we have now is that the extension would cost about $350 million. Arapahoe County, Douglas County, and Littleton did present our case to RTD. However, the remaining fast track, there is some money left in the fast tracks fund that is going towards train rehabilitation or train replacement, track maintenance. And then a little bit of that remainder money is going towards the joint service, as they're calling it, as part of the Front Range Passenger Rail, which is the first service that will start. That would basically service the unfinished Northwest rail line to Boulder and Longmont.
Yeah, they had Sterling Ranch as an identified stop for the Front Range Passenger Rail. So, I mean, that's kind of out there, but it could be their Highlands Ranch's, you know, connection too. So
absolutely, yes. So yeah, the railroad was depressed through Littleton in the 1980s as a way to try to, the railroad was such a barrier, right? If you were kind of stuck on either side of it, if a train was passing by, and depending on how many trains per day. So the railroad was depressed in Littleton in the 80s as a way to try to like reconnect downtown and Littleton Boulevard. There was a whole thing with the depot. So this is a picture of them moving the depot, which is pretty fun, which is now at the downtown station. And then I think news. Yeah, and then this depot is, the Littleton Art Depot now, off of Port. So RTD in Littleton currently, I know we've talked about this before. During the pandemic, RTD did cut 7 of our 14 bus routes, and many of those were more of those internal bus routes, right? That people took to get to the grocery store or to get to school or to work. RTD has faced many challenges, both from a funding standpoint, also from a driver shortage that had existed prior to the pandemic, and the pandemic only made that driver shortage worse.
There is no real driver shortage. There's a pay problem.
Yes.
If they raise up the price enough, there would be plenty of drivers. But sorry, that was.
No, you're not wrong. And when I that was a conversation of like, how do we get drivers? How do we create a pipeline that, people want to become transit drivers? Because if you get your CDL and you have an option to, and I don't know what the salary is, so I guess I don't want to misspeak.
It's like $25 an hour.
A moderate salary,
Yeah.
low to moderate salary, or you can go make over $100,000 driving for oil companies in Wyoming. Which one do you think you're gonna take? So yes, it's a pay problem.
Yeah, and there's also an issue with, well, I don't know if they've anymore, but when Deborah Johnson was here a couple years ago, she talked about the issue of driver safety. And then at the time, there was issues with drivers being assaulted. So yeah, you're getting paid less and there's a threat of bodily harm. Like, why? There's not a question, right?
Right. And so, yeah, it goes back to how are we funding the system? How are we promoting a system that, you know, people want to work for and ride? RTD has gone through a whole restructuring, reimagine RTD project. And they've created a system optimization plan that really focuses where they're seeing their services. Unfortunately, of the 7 bus routes that were cut during the pandemic, I believe only one of those is even on their system optimization plan. So our existing routes are on there. And then one additional route is on there. However, they have not added that service back in, and I don't know if they have a time frame for that. I believe they're also kind of going through a new system optimization plan, so I guess more to come from there. RTD has created their partnership program, which is a funding mechanism for local agencies to help meet our mobility needs. So I know Dan Rainey from Lone Tree talked about how that's how they help pay for the Lone Tree Link is through the RTD partnership. We have not yet gone after one of those grants, but it's something that we are continuing to look at. They are also doing a park and ride study right now. So they got a federal grant to look at 8 different park and rides across the metro area to look at development opportunities. Both the downtown and Mineral Station are included in that project, which is kind of a change of mind from RTD. Historically, they've been pretty anti-development at their park and rides, especially I think, you know, and granted this was like over 10 years ago when we started talking about the Quadrant Road at Santa Fe and Mineral and potential development opportunities there. They just weren't in a place to really have that conversation or be interested in that conversation, but obviously they're doing a whole project about it. So that sentiment is starting to change. And I don't have any updates from there. I think we have a second meeting with them next week, so I can provide more updates at the next meeting. But especially with front range passenger rail, you know, and that was something big we talked about at the council meeting with Mineral, is how do we leverage these RTD lots, and especially at Mineral, big wide open parking lot as development opportunities to create true TOD. You know, as we all talked about at the last TMB meeting as well, is like, let's really leverage that as an opportunity and let's really create the TOD that we want it to be. And then lastly, they are currently doing a bus stop infrastructure and accessibility assessment. And there's some edits in this presentation before it gets posted online. The bus stop infrastructure accessibility assessment, they have analyzed every single RTD bus stop across the region. And they've done a whole accessibility assessment, and they've provided that data to the cities, which is amazing because that's something that's been on our list and we just have not had the capacity or the time to do. And so that's a really great resource for us to know what are the amenities, what is the accessibility, how do we have improvements, to help us start prioritizing, okay, where are improvements?
That's complete and delivered, or that's in progress?
It's almost complete. I don't believe it's published online yet. But we just had a follow-up meeting with them. And so they have a whole bus stop kind of design guidelines or typology. So depending on, you know, the service levels at the stop, like this is what the stop would entail. So, you know, lowest level, it's a sign, it's a bench, it's a trash can. Highest level, it's, you know, a station with real-time tracking and, you know, micro mobility and bike racks and kind of like the whole gamut of a transit route. And they define the typologies based off of ridership and the frequency of the routes and just some.
Sounds like it'll be very useful.
Yes, very, very useful. So very excited that they embarked on that and that we didn't have to pay for it. Human services in Littleton. So these are more specialized services, right? So we have Accessoride that we've talked about. That's the paratransit from RTD. We have Omnibus, which we've talked a lot about, that serves people with disabilities and residents over the age of 60. You know, as Our lovely folks in the audience have told us time and time again about the imperfections of omnibus and how it doesn't serve their needs. So what are some different options that could better serve the residents of Littleton, especially the aging population? And then Dr. Mack and TSAC, so those aren't technically transit providers, however, they are transit resources. So in the world of transit, we have these things called coordinating councils. So Dr. Mack, which is the Denver Regional Mobility and Access Council, and then TSAC, which is Transportation Solutions Arapahoe County. Dr. Mack is the Regional Coordinating Council. TSAC is the Local Coordinating Council. And basically what coordinating councils do is they're just opportunities for folks to resource share, to get together in a room and say, we provide this service, you provide this service, how can we talk together? How can we better educate the public of the different services? And so with TSAC, like we will attend different events, either at, SMHO housing events. I think I went to one at Powers Place last year. And then Dr. Mack puts together a regional guide that has like every single human service transportation option in the Denver region, in what's called the Getting There Guide. And it's not I would love it to be able to say, hey, you live in Littleton, this is exactly what you can access. And so you have to dig through it a little more, but it's a really, really, really great resource to know what transportation options are out there. So highly recommend folks check that out. It's online. They also translate it into, I think, like 10 different languages at this point. So those are just really great resources. And I think, something, we participate in both of these organizations. They also do a lot of travel training. I think that's kind of on that cultural piece that we've talked about, or behavior change. A lot of times folks don't know how to use transit, right? And like, if you don't know how to use it, you're never going to use it. And so travel training is a way to create a safe space to say, this is how you access a bus stop. This is how you buy a ticket, either in person or on your phone. This is how you get onto a bus. This is how you pay for, if you're paying on the bus, this is how you show your ticket, just to give people that ability to know how to do it and so they can do it on their own in the future. And so I think travel training is something I know I would love to kind of expand what we do here and do more of that. Because same with light rail, right? You might know how to use a bus, but if you don't know how to use light rail, it can be intimidating. Some other ongoing projects, we had a Rapid Go, so I won't talk about that. Front range passenger rail, I've talked to you a lot about that. Council did endorse the mineral station at the meeting last week. That was just last week. And we are anticipating the ballot measure to be in this 2026 election. And one thing I did want to mention on that ballot measure, it would be a new tax or additional sales tax. They're kind of defining what the actual jurisdictions that would be participating in, how far off the corridor. So I'm not exactly sure. I think they say would capture about 2 million people though within the taxing district. And what front range passenger rail, the district has proposed is to have a share back or like a grant type of program so that local jurisdictions who have stations can access funding, right? Because they're going to help pay for the platform, ticketing, like everything to make sure that a train can't stop. But any station amenities or station areas or however we want to build up the station is all on the cost of the local jurisdiction. So this is a way to kind of share back that funding. We're not exactly sure what that percentage would be for a place like Littleton, how they're going to determine that. These are all things that are in flux. But I know at last week's council meeting, we did mention, and you all talked about it last month too, about if we're gonna have passenger rail, we need to work on transit and we need to have better transit access, especially where RTD does not service. And so is there a way to get a circulator or some type of micro transit? And so I heard the frustrations from public comment about, you can get a circulator or micro transit because of front range passenger rail, but not because residents want that. And I totally empathize with that. I feel like this is an opportunity because of passenger rail that we might have a dedicated funding stream to actually make that happen. So hopefully we can really hit everyone's needs and have a way to create that service sooner rather than later because we have a dedicated funding source. I say this, it's all in flux. We have to see if a ballot measure even passes in November to really know what next steps are, but I think this is a really good potential possibility to get a service with sustainable funding moving forward. Lastly, the BRT partnership and implementation project. So bus rapid transit, we talked about, we have the Broadway corridor study that identified BRT. So DRCOG convenes what they call the BRT partnership, which is again, just kind of a collaborative group of jurisdictions around the metro area who are trying to implement BRT. And so it's really just a place to say, hey, lesson learned here, we're embarking on here, do you have any ideas? Just a place that we can kind of learn from each other. DRCOG also received a federal grant to do a specific project about funding and finance and legal and regulatory measures for implementing BRT. So we've kind of combined the partnership and that project into one, but Littleton is participating in that project. We're definitely probably on the lower end of progress on BRT corridors, like Colfax is being built currently. Federal BRT has gone through, there's a lot of like jargon that you guys don't need to know about with alternatives analysis and alignments, and then there's federal processes to get federal grants. So we have a corridor study, we have a vision, right? That's kind of where we're at. Whereas other corridors are further along in that process to actually get to implementation. So I think it's a good opportunity for us to learn from these, folks that are actually implementing, applying for grants, doing the construction. But also this project I think is at a great time for us because we're at the bottom, right? All we can go from up, and so we can use the results from the study. What is the financing, right? Is it debt financing? Is it some type of sales tax? Is there some other way that we can help fund a Broadway BRT, the legal regulatory framework? So all that to say, that project just started. I believe it will take about a year. All of these will also help to inform the TMP, which will also look at transit. Hopefully it'll give us some really great next steps and kind of knowledge of how to approach BRT and actually get it implemented in the near term. On that note, how do we pay for transit? I think that's one of the big things, right? And so again, we're looking at ongoing study recommendations of kind of what they're proposing. There's the RTD grants, there's federal grants as well. FTA grants come with a whole slew of requirements, which I believe that we can manage if we get to that point, but there would be a little bit of a learning curve there. The cross-community collaboration, especially with the Arapago study, we've talked about, is there a more regional solution rather than just a Littleton solution? I don't know that answer yet, but I think there could be, right? And then there's always like the sales tax or other ballot measures, front range passenger rail being the one that will be in the November election. All right, I talked a lot. All of that to say is, again, just hope this kind of gave a baseline level of like, what is transit, what are options? But I figured for the rest of the time, knowing that we're almost out of time, of like, what is the vision for transit? As we're embarking on the Littleton Boulevard study, and we do have an open house coming up, if we're dreaming big, could there be a streetcar on Littleton Boulevard? I don't know how we're gonna pay for it, but
We already did it at one point.
we sure did.
When the city was 2,500 people, they had a streetcar.
Yeah.
And now we can't figure out how to pay for it with 55 or 45,000 people.
That's where that's our job, to figure out how we're gonna pay for it. But like, we need the community's vision to know what we're trying to build.
Yeah.
And then, we've talked about peer cities. Obviously, this presentation didn't get to those peer cities. I do think this could be a great opportunity for TMB to do some of their own research, kind of like what we've done in the past with multimodal places of like, what are really inspirational cities or, peer cities around the country that are doing things that we want to look at. Obviously, the ongoing project recommendations, we will bring those back to this group as we get them, and hopefully bring in more of those project teams to come and present to you all. And then lastly, just the funding mechanism to achieve our vision. And that's really where, we come in to figure out, okay, We know the vision. How are we gonna pay for it? What does that look like? That's all I have. So I don't know if there's, wanna have some discussion of future in transit. We can also table that for the next time we talk about transit, recognizing I know 3 of you will not be here at the next conversation.
I would say it would probably also be wise to table it because we do have a couple pretty important things still to discuss, if I'm correct, Jeff.
Well, we do have to get to a few things before we leave today, yes. So I think that was a lot.
Mhm.
I would suggest a few things. To your point, 3 of us will not be here to carry this on. Only 2 of you will be. So I would suggest that we make a priority of getting this video posted. To the website, getting to Pam's comments before, and for the new people coming on, whenever you decide to pick this up again, you task them at the very least to, I guess, and Josh and Kelly to watch this. I think having the conversation about next steps is a good one. I think the peer cities, I guess I had thought we were gonna have a little bit on that in here, so I wasn't quite ready for that part. But it is an opportunity, to your point, to reach out and have some conversations for the individual board members to reach out and talk about it.
Do we have a sort of a list of peer cities that we want to deep dive on, like we did on Malta, or are we just gonna go?
Well, it sounds like.
GT
It sounds like we got Englewood and we got Golden and we got places like Summit County. We talked about Summit State.
Yeah, we've talked about Summit County. I will say with Summit County, it's a little bit of a different context, right? It's a tourist mountain town and they offer free transit service, right? And a lot of tourist mountain towns can offer free transit service because of the high ridership and because of people traveling from out of state who may not necessarily have a car or want to drive in the mountains. And so I think we can research that. I do think the applicability might be a little different for Littleton. I think Fort Collins was another one, obviously a little different because they're kind of their own entity and not within a larger metro region. However, Fort Collins has done a lot with BRT and more, I think first last mile integration and just like it's also a college town too.
I think a takeaway here without going to each one here
Yeah,
is
yeah.
if you guys could help
Yeah,
us come up with a list to
thank you.
Sure.
I think all of that to say is I think we probably need to do a little more research on what is truly a policy for us to look at.
Yeah, I also,
Hop, skip and a jump thing?
Boulder.
Boulder? Yeah. Is that?
And Boulder is an interesting model because RTD does run Boulder's transit. Boulder has a long legacy of buying up transit service. So like RTD kind of sets what they think the defined transit service should be. And then Boulder said, hey, we want 15-minute frequencies or 10-minute frequencies. So we're gonna buy up service to make sure that we're getting the frequency that we wanna see. It's not necessarily what RTD defined. But I do think is a very interesting option that we should explore in Littleton. And I have brought it up to the Arapago team.
one question I have is, do we have any vision setting cities in there? Because I think it's really important to have local ones because their context is so similar.
Yeah.
But there are cities that have our population level
Mm-hmm.
that are not enormous cities that have really great transit.
Yeah.
So why is it so good? You
Right.
know, and like to explore it. So like, I think we should have peer cities in our region, because that's the context that we exist in. And then also, what is the gap,
Yeah.
between us
What's
and
the model city?
yes, yeah.
What is that? And I guess to you all, if you have ideas of peer cities or model cities, please send us an email. And we can include that in there. I think the whole peer city, model city conversation would be a presentation in its own. So that's kind of why I did not include it today. I just felt like there was too much to cover. I think we could have a really great conversation about what is the visionary, what are other people in our region doing, how do they fund it, what are the, kind of like the multimodal conversation that we had previously of like, what were the challenges, what were the key things that they said, hey, you have to have in order to make this happen. So next steps.
So I can't remember I don't have the list in front of me. We were gonna pick this up again. I can't remember if it was gonna be in April or May or June, but.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to look.
We'll look that up.
Yeah. We have it down though in our
Yes.
steps.
Okay. Next up is
Council,
what was that?
semi-annual.
Yes. So, I am gonna put that memo together here. This weekend is when I have it scheduled on my calendar. So, what I have, I guess I'm just looking for feedback from you guys here. Here's what I was planning on. Obviously, I'm gonna talk about upcoming. It's the easier one. That probably won't be first in the order, but it would be, it's the first we can talk about now. So we have our work plan, our 2026 work plan goals. TMP update obviously is a big thing that we're gonna be working on this year. The transit that we just talked about, circulator bus. We're gonna spend time focusing on public engagement, sidewalk improvements, and then we fully expect to spend some time on Project Downtown. I think we're done with passenger rail, yeah? Is there anything else we need to do before?
No, I think right now we're kind of waiting to hear next steps about a DOLA grant that the district applied for, do some station area planning in preparation for the ballot measure. And then I think the city needs to really figure out what is our plan for station area planning for.
I like it, check.
Yep.
So we got one of our 6 things done, 3 months in and one of them done. So I was gonna talk about those other 5 things that we're planning on working on throughout the year. So then the other big part of the memo is usually what have we done? I had a list that I pulled together. I don't think I'm gonna put all of this in, or maybe make it all pretty quick, but a Lottie Street corridor study. And we did the participated in the walking tour, is that what we called it?
Walking tour, yeah.
We spent some time going through reviewing the Broadway mineral reconstruction design project. We talked about the ULI gateway. They came in and talked a little bit about that. We talked to the new director of communications. What's her title? Is that right? Got it. And talked about communications and the team and the structure she's trying to build out. We talked about omnibus and shopping cart. We met with the superintendent of LPS and talked about our partnership there. We have talked a little bit about the sub-area plan, which is ongoing, the Littleton sub-area plan, which is an ongoing project. We spent some time talking about budgeting and funding, pilot project updates, and we met with the community development team to talk about how do we partner there. I think I
That's a lot to cover.
That's a lot. So I guess I'd ask if you guys are the things, I mean, I have my own ideas, but are the things you'd rather be, I'm not gonna go into depth on all these. It'd probably be more of a bullet list, kind of like that, maybe with a little bit. Are there things you think are more important, things I didn't cover?
I do think like forward facing, I think that almost every one of those we preface with, we talked about. And when I first joined the TMB, my observation was that the TMB is primarily functioning as like city staff educates a small group of 7 people on what's happening in the city. But that's about it. You know, like what did we actually do, and get done? And I think that we've been failing at that, generally, I think. And it's hard because like we're not set up, to really get anything done. But I think that needs to change. I think that that's something that, and anytime we talked about getting anything done, people would say, whoa, it's gonna take at least 10 years for us to get anything done. And that, saying that all the time reinforces that, and so we're.
Well, what we talked about,
Yes.
what we talked about at the end of last year, we can't do anything. We
Well,
can point it out. We do not get anything done. What we can get done is make recommendations and provide advice to council. And that's where we have been failing. That is our goal. Our job is to provide advice and recommendations, not to build things.
no, I'm not saying we're swinging hammers, but like what I mean is, it's like, can we get on the city council schedule? Is kind of the question. Instead of us really trying to drive things, in a more forceful way, but like collaboratively, but hopefully a bit more forcefully. So.
I think we have though, to a certain extent. One, we started with the whole meet, greet and eat thing that we've started going to and participating. So we've been out there, we've actually been engaging the community more on council's behalf, just to let them know that, hey, Talk to us.
And safer streets, you know, we had a really big hand in safer streets. I would say that was probably one of the main things that, you know, I don't know if we want to reflect that on there, but like that initiative being kicked off was, you can correct us if we're wrong, but you know,
No, you guys had a big impact.
largely driven, I think, in the long
That and the TMP, I would say.
Technically, this is a 6-month semi-annual memo. We can only ride that horse so far like that.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, that's true.
And I will say, it's like, our job is to kind of set forth both policy recommendations, but also to be that conduit between the citizens and the city on transportation related topics. And a lot of that, one of the big missions we've been really successful in last year is we have brought a lot of that information to the public, because there's people who didn't even know we existed. A lot of people.
A
And
lot of
that
people still
is
don't
now
know.
a lot of people that know us. We're probably one of the most attended citizen
Oh, yeah.
boards by outside of the board members. And that is in no small part due to the good work that we have done. And it's a challenge.
Building off of that, these fine people over here have convinced all of us
Yeah.
that we need a circulator bus.
I feel like
We
we
convinced them.
I feel like we've been pushing that pretty hard, yes.
So, you know,
But I think one of the things we should make kind of like a chief topic of, like, one of our recommendations would be related to the sidewalk program, because one, I think it's one of those that can be most effectively done, even if it's in piecemeal, but also there can be various programs where it can be like citizen participation, like partial payments by the city. Like, there's a lot of very viable and very possible solutions that would help really start bringing some of that to conclusion, and people would see it, which would help a lot too.
Yeah, and ultimately, you know, we are advice to council of like, you know, what we should recommend, but I would think we should hopefully be some accountability to council as well. You know, like the citizen's voice of accountability, you know, to say, we're not requesting this. This is the citizen's voice of saying, we want this, you know, like we need to make this happen. How do we make this happen?
And I think one other thing we need to make sure that is part of the memo is kind of like on that accountability, is like, we've had a lot of projects and a lot of like things that have been tried, have been recommended. We want to see the transition from the test to the full-time implementation. Like a good example, like we talked about pilot projects. You know, there's been things that have worked really well and the citizens really like, and there's a few things that the citizens really dislike. But we need to start moving those things that have been very productive and start moving those into better implementation.
All right, so as far as the forward looking, I didn't say it out loud here, but my plan is as part of that to say, like, our 2026 goal is to have recommendations, formal written recommendations to city council on these topics during the year.
Yeah.
move the bag.
Yeah, and I would want to put in a few sentences of like, you know, we really are the voice of the citizens here, and we've had citizens showing up advocating for things. And we want to see you all reciprocate, you know, the amount of effort that they put in with addressing these questions specifically.
It's all we can do.
Yeah.
All right, anything else you guys want to see in there? So I'll do it this week to this week, and I'll send it out via email through our city emails. I'll do a BCC so we can adhere to the sunshine laws. But everybody could feel free to respond directly to me with any comments or edits, and then I will deliver it to you folks. Do we have a deadline for when we're supposed to have it?
I have not heard anything, actually. We can follow up though.
And I have the format, the official format. Well, actually, I don't have official format. I have examples of the official format from others, and so I'll put it into that this time.
You guys break the mold, so.
We won't.
Usually do.
All right, so that's that. TMP update. Any news that you want to share?
Did you guys have a chance to watch our presentation on March 3rd, excuse me?
March 3rd, yes.
Yes. Okay.
That was what was supposed to be in there. That was the link you were supposed to have in there.
Okay.
So we will send that out,
That'll send that out.
yeah, so, it is so close to being released, I can't tell you anything other than that. Other than if, check BidNet.
So close.
Yeah. Check BidNet, that's all we could say. So you guys will be.
So we're expecting, I'm sorry, so you're expecting like it to be done? Someone selected soon?
No, sorry. BidNet is the system by which we would send out the solicitation.
Got it. It's so close to being released so that then we can start talking to people. Got it, okay.
Yes. Well, and then actually at that point, we officially cannot talk to people. And that applies both to us as staff. Also, you guys will be receiving an email from Veronica Hall in procurement, just about one, if you guys get questions about it, to direct it toward her, and then some instructions on any potential conflicts of interest. So you guys are not staff, but you're kind of in this kind of quasi-liminal space. So
Dave has to disclose his consulting firm?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
I do know that I will have to provide a better disclosure.
Okay, so Veronica will send an email with directions on that, so that's all we could really say. I think
We're expecting the RFP to be released any day now. Okay, good.
very soon. Check BidNet. So, I will say though,
Very soon. I like very soon. That's fine. We can move that. All right. And that process is we're not gonna pick that up again until probably August timeframe. Is that right?
yeah, so until we officially sign a contract, once the solicitation's out, we really can't say anything publicly, so.
So it's end of summer.
Yep.
And then we'll get our next update.
Yes, yeah. Excited.
So we don't have to have that on there anymore.
Yeah.
Any other staff comments?
Meet, Greet, and Eats were announced for 2026. There will be 4. They're listed here. So one a month in the 4 different council districts. So we can maybe put that on the agenda for next time to talk about TMB's involvement with those and if you would like to be attending those and how to structure that moving forward. One thing I realized I did not put on here is the Littleton Boulevard sub-area planning is going to be having an open house on April 9th at the Epic campus. I don't know the exact time.
4:30 to 6.
Thank you. 4:30 to 6, Epic campus, be there. I'm talking, we're at the beginning of that study. Is really talking about like, what is the vision? What's your vision for housing, for historic preservation, for transportation? So it's really kind of like the core, like we're at the beginning, right? We're doing existing conditions analysis, but that will be a great opportunity to participate. There will also be an online survey that I can show. I already shared with Front Range Passenger Rail. Thank you all for your time last month to come to a decision for Mineral Station. Council did endorse a Mineral Station. That. That's it.
I've got a couple of wrap-up comments. So I don't know if you guys want to say, if you guys have any comments first, or if you want me to share mine. Look at you, Jeff, for direction.
Do any board members have any other comments? They want to share?
Do you know who was selected to replace the people?
Yeah, council officially, I think it was the same night as the Front Range Passenger Rail on the 17th, so, yeah.
I do know.
It's posted on the website.
Yeah, I don't remember the names off the top of my head, but yeah.
I'll look.
All right, yeah.
All right, you're up.
Okay, so one thing that Pam mentioned, John Marchetti, so I think if you watch the March 17th video, there's a lot of city leadership who had comments about John, and so he was actually at one of our meetings just a couple months ago, but I think Reed had a great kind of summary of John. He said, John was always kind, and a lot of times he was at odds with the city, and he even helped sue the city. It was always kind, and I think, in an age where everything gets turned personal and everything, John was a great example of how to be a good human being. So sad to hear about John. On a lighter note, for those members who are leaving, we have small gifts for you guys. So we have some cards, so I'll hand these out. And then for Jeff, who is one of 2 remaining original members, we have a little, little drink for you to enjoy. Yes, don't drop that in the glass. Oh, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Michael, so, yes, we know it's a big commitment, so we thank you guys for showing up and doing the homework that you get assigned, and
Now I can't say that I was a volunteer.
That's right.
I was paid handsomely.
So.
Thank you, that's right.
Thank you, we really appreciate it.
Thank you. I just want to say consistently impressed with you guys, honestly. As a Littleton resident, it's just so reassuring to know we have such, dedicated and talented staff. So thank you for everything. I learned a ton the last three years and can't believe it. It's already flown by like that.
Yeah.
And I want to thank everyone for your support. This has been a really interesting and great educational opportunity for me. And I'm really so appreciative that I've been able to contribute, and I hope I've contributed, although Matt says we haven't done anything, but that's right. I think we've done some stuff.
Room for improvement.
Yeah,
We've got a lot of
there's always
things.
room.
A lot of things.
And I'll mirror Michael's, like, being part of this, and I really want to push like every citizen to be a part of one of these boards and to get involved, because there's so much that you guys do every single day and you work so hard. And I know that you're just a small part of the overall staff who does all this. And we do a lot of good stuff in the city, and you don't know it until you actually dig in and see it. And so thank you guys for all your support and help. Made it way easier than it could be. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing all of you guys soon.
Yeah, when I moved back to Littleton in 2019, I was a sole person just speaking at city council meetings saying it'd be nice to safely ride my bike on the streets. And it felt like at that point in time that no progress was being made, and that it was just, speaking into the wind, kind of, so to say. And there's been a pretty large tidal shift, it feels like, in that, and it doesn't move as quickly as I would like it to move, but it feels very different now than it did then. And that's encouraging. And you two have been a large part of that as well. So thank you for that.
And we expect you all to participate in the TMP engagement efforts.
Not enough.
If you're not at the open houses, we're gonna be mad, but it's fine.
Your phone numbers and your personal email.
True. You know how to find this, huh?
So now we can all go for a beer and you don't have to.
For those three.
I mean, not all of you can get a beer with them, but like one or two.
Actually, after April 1st, I believe is the official date, right? So next week, the five of us could go have a beer together. We can talk all the city related.
That's right.
And Jeff, you are moving up in the world of boards and
I'm
commissions.
moving up, but I'm
To a
moving.
quasi judicial board.
So I think I'm gonna be on the historical preservation committee, I think is what we call it now. Commission.
It's cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm interested in spreading my wings out, seeing more of what's going on in the city. The Littleton sub-area plan, the HPC is gonna be a big part of that, so you're not gonna get rid of me there.
So I will be running it.
Absolutely.
It'll give us a great opportunity to cross collaborate too.
There you go.
There's a concept.
There you go. So I'm looking forward to that and kind of getting part of that. Yeah. And I will be, I guess technically I won't be the chair, I won't be a member anymore, but we're still gonna meet next Wednesday and plan for the April meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Anyone have anything else to add?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And with that, we will adjourn the meeting. That's all.